Have you ever felt that piercing confusion when someone who hurt you suddenly reappears? As if their betrayal never happened? It can be disorienting, even paralyzing. One moment, they walked away, leaving behind a heart they broke. And then one day, they stand in front of you, speaking words that sound familiar but feel hollow. You may ask yourself quietly, do they really miss me? Or do they just miss what I gave them? Here's the truth that is difficult, yet necessary, to face. They do not always return out of love. Love does not vanish so easily, only to reappear when loneliness knocks on their door. No, they return because you were their source of stability, of comfort, of energy they could not replicate elsewhere. When they left, they believed the world would offer them something better, more exciting, more aligned with their desires. But illusions do not last. The novelty fades, and what remains is the echo of your absence. You were not just someone to fill their time. You were a sanctuary. You were the one who listened when no one else could sit in silence with them. You were the one who forgave, even when the apology was absent. You gave them consistency in a world that thrives on conditions and transactions. And it is only when they wandered away that they realized what you offered was rare. What you carried inside you was not just affection. It was a form of strength disguised as softness. When they try to recreate the safety they had with you in the arms of others, they eventually find emptiness, because it was not just companionship you provided, it was nourishment. Emotional nourishment. A kind of presence that makes a broken soul feel whole, even if only for a moment. That kind of presence is not easily replaced. And so, when the illusion of greener grass collapses, they return, not out of growth, not out of transformation, but because they miss the ecosystem you created for them. But here is where you must be cautious. Do not mistake their hunger for affection. Do not confuse their need with love. People come back not always to cherish, but to consume. They are thirsty, and they remember you as the well that never ran dry. But you know now that a well cannot pour endlessly without being replenished. And you have begun to understand your worth. That being someone's endless supply is not love. It is sacrifice. This is why they return when silence grows too loud. When the world they chased feels shallow. When they discover no one else calms their storm the way you once did. They come back not because they have healed, but because they are empty. Because the charger they relied on is gone. And their soul feels like it is running on 1%. But you, my dear listener, you are not a charger. You are not a resource to be drained and refilled at someone else's convenience. You are a person with a heart, a soul, and a sacred energy. When someone reduces you to a supply, they disqualify themselves from receiving your presence again. Yes, forgiveness is possible. Yes, compassion can remain. But forgiveness does not require reopening the door. Compassion does not mean allowing repetition of pain. You can love someone in spirit, and still choose yourself in practice. That, too, is love turned inward. Love that protects. Love that honors your own worth. So when they return, remember, they did not come back because they suddenly saw the light. They returned because you were the light. And the world without your glow has felt unbearably dark. But you no longer need to dim yourself for those who only notice your radiance when they are drowning in shadow. This is the first truth to hold onto. Their return is not proof of love. It is proof of your rare energy, your unmatched presence, and their realization too late that they cannot replace what they once took for granted. The weight of absence and the echo of silence. There is a strange thing about absence, it speaks. Louder than words. Louder than apologies. Louder than explanations. When someone who once had access to your heart suddenly loses it, the silence they are left with begins to echo. At first, they ignore it. They drown it in distractions, in new faces, in temporary thrills. Guilt, after all, can be suppressed, but loneliness cannot be silenced. Loneliness is relentless. It creeps into their quietest hours. When the noise fades and the masks they wear fall away, they may laugh in public, scroll endlessly through their phone, surround themselves with company that looks lively from the outside. But when the night comes, and the world slows down, the absence of your presence whispers like a haunting melody they cannot escape. You see, guilt is a feeling they can rationalize. They can tell themselves stories to erase the sting of what they did. They can convince themselves you will always be there if they need you. But loneliness is different. It is a mirror, showing them the truth of what they have lost. It is sharp, it is heavy, and it reminds them of the peace, the safety, the warmth that only your presence carried. This is why many return. Not because they have done the inner work, not because they have transformed, but because being alone feels unbearable. They don't come back carrying a heart full of growth. They come back carrying a hunger to escape emptiness. They come back because the world outside does not hold them the way you did, does not listen the way you did, does not steady their chaos the way you did. But here is the tender reminder you need. Their loneliness is not your responsibility. You are not a cure for the void they created within themselves. You are not medicine for the ache of their own choices. And you are not a second chance for someone who once gambled with your heart as though it were disposable. They may speak of missing you. They may tell you they regret. And perhaps, part of it is true. They regret losing the feeling of being seen, being understood, being cared for in a way that was unconditional. But regret is not the same as readiness. Regret is not the same as love. A person can miss the comfort you gave, without ever learning how to give comfort in return. And so, when they knock on the door of your heart again, remember this: not every return is meant to be a reunion. Sometimes, their return is only a symptom of their loneliness, not a sign of their transformation. Sometimes, their words of missing you are nothing more than an attempt to ease their own pain, not to protect your peace. What matters is what you have been doing in their absence. While they were running from their loneliness, you were learning to embrace solitude. While they were looking for distraction, you were discovering how to breathe in your own energy, how to heal, how to stand on your own without collapsing. They feared solitude because it made them face themselves. But you have turned solitude into strength. And this is where your paths divide. They return out of emptiness, but you have grown into wholeness. They return out of need, but you now understand that love is not need. Love is a choice, an offering, a daily act of presence and respect. And when you truly know that, you cannot mistake their longing for love anymore. So let their return remind you, not of what you've lost, but of how far you've come. You are no longer waiting for someone to validate your worth. You are no longer placing your healing in someone else's hands. Their loneliness is theirs to carry, theirs to face, theirs to learn from, and your peace is yours to protect. The silence they once thought was temporary is now your boundary. The distance they assumed was a pause is, in truth, your liberation. And that is the power of absence. It does not just reveal what they lost. It reveals what you have found within yourself. The male mind and the mystery of love. Love, for men, does not always blossom the way we expect. While women often experience love as an emotional flood, a kind of soulful recognition, men can encounter it as a quieter, slower unfolding. It may surprise you that, psychologically, many men do not recognize love at its earliest stages. Instead, they notice attraction, admiration, or curiosity. Love often sneaks in later, revealing itself after trust has been built, after comfort has settled in, after consistency has shown its face. Imagine love as a seed hidden deep beneath the soil. A woman might feel it sprout quickly, sensing the warmth of connection right away. For a man, however, the soil takes longer to break. He may water it with gestures of care, but he does not always recognize that he is nurturing love. Often, he only realizes its presence when the plant has already grown strong enough to cast shade in his inner world. This is why patience becomes essential. A man's brain is often conditioned to prioritize problem solving and protection. His focus might linger on practical matters. Am I capable of being with this person? Do I have the means to support a relationship? Is this connection safe for me emotionally? These questions create a subtle filter through which love must pass. Unlike the romanticized version of instant fireworks. For him, love is something that must align with trust, admiration, and a sense of purpose. From a psychological perspective, men tend to experience love through actions before emotions. Where a woman might say, "I feel close to him," a man may express, "I want to do something for her." His brain associates love with responsibility and effort. This is not because he is unemotional, but because his emotional wiring often links intimacy with showing up consistently rather than speaking endlessly about feelings. Have you ever noticed how a man who rarely says, "I love you," may instead fix something for you? Drive across town to see you. Or remember the smallest detail you once mentioned? That is his love speaking. For him, actions hold the weight that words sometimes cannot. Understanding this truth allows you to see beyond what is spoken into what is lived. Yet here lies the mystery. While men may approach love from logic or responsibility, their emotional breakthroughs happen in silence. It often comes during a quiet evening. Perhaps when he is alone, reflecting, he thinks back on how life feels lighter with you around. How his days carry more meaning. How his restlessness finds calm in your presence. And in that stillness, something shifts. He realizes that what he feels is not mere affection, not simple attraction, but love. This inner recognition is profound. Because once a man realizes he is in love, it reshapes his entire outlook. The male brain often reorients itself around what it treasures most. That is why a man in love suddenly begins to plan for the future. He may start speaking of "we" instead of "I." He envisions holidays, shared homes, maybe even family. Love transforms his individual path into a shared journey. But what makes him fall deeply, rather than casually, in love? The answer often rests in the way a woman makes him feel about himself. When a man feels respected, when he feels safe enough to show vulnerability without fear of judgment, when he feels that his presence brings joy rather than pressure, his heart opens in ways he cannot ignore. Unlike surface attraction, which fades, these experiences create the kind of emotional gravity that pulls him closer and keeps him there. Another fascinating element lies in admiration. Men are deeply moved when they feel admired not only for their strengths, but also for their efforts. Even small acknowledgments, like recognizing his consistency, his attempts to care, or his growth, can awaken deeper affection. It speaks to the male psyche's core need, the desire to feel capable, valued, and seen. However, it is important to remember that men, just like women, carry their own wounds. Some may fear love because of past betrayals. Some may resist their emotions because vulnerability was discouraged in their upbringing. Others may guard their hearts, not because they do not feel, but because they feel so intensely that the risk of loss terrifies them. This is why some men may appear distant or avoidant even when love is blooming inside them. The seed is there, but the soil of trust has not yet been fully softened. In this sense, women often misinterpret silence or slowness as disinterest. But for many men, silence is where love matures. A man might not declare his feelings quickly, but he shows them in how he stays, how he supports, how he listens even when words are scarce. His love speaks in presence rather than performance. The truth is, love does not always announce itself loudly in the male heart. Sometimes it enters quietly, like a tide slowly rising until he suddenly realizes he is surrounded by it. And when he finally names it, when he admits to himself and to you, "I love you," that confession carries the weight of his soul. It is not casual, not accidental. It is the result of reflection, of building trust, of letting down walls he never thought he would lower. To truly understand how men fall in love is to honor this gradual, layered process. It is not about rushing him, nor about doubting his silence. It is about seeing the unspoken language of love that men often carry, the acts of service, the consistency, the quiet devotion. When you learn to recognize these signs, you will realize that love is not absent, it simply blooms differently in his world. And perhaps that is the real beauty of it. Love that arrives slowly often roots itself deeply. It does not burn out like a spark. It grows like a steady flame that warms the years ahead. The silent power of boundaries. When we speak of silence, we often imagine it as an empty space, a lack of words, or even a void that feels unsettling. But silence can also be one of the most powerful ways to set boundaries without uttering a single sentence. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but rather gentle lines that define where we end and where others begin. They are markers of self-respect and indicators of how we wish to be treated. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or even professional, silence becomes a mirror that reflects more than we might expect. When you stop over-explaining yourself, when you no longer rush to defend your choices, when you do not give in to the pressure of justifying your needs, you are communicating something deeply powerful, that your worth does not depend on convincing others. Silence, in this sense, becomes a boundary that teaches people how to interact with you. Imagine a moment when someone is trying to provoke you, expecting you to argue back. If you meet that provocation with silence instead of reaction, you remove the fuel that keeps the conflict alive. Your silence communicates, without aggression, that you will not be drawn into unnecessary battles. It establishes a line that says, I choose peace over chaos. I choose clarity over confusion. I choose myself over the need to win an argument. That is the silent power of boundaries. Of course, boundaries are not always easy to set. Many of us grew up learning to please others, to avoid conflict, to put others before ourselves even when it hurt us. For people like this, silence can feel uncomfortable at first. It can feel like rejection or withdrawal. But in reality, silence paired with healthy intention is not rejection, it is protection. It is a way of honoring your emotional space and teaching others to honor it too. There is a deep healing that comes when we recognize that not every conversation requires our presence. Not every message demands an immediate response. And not every attempt to cross our boundaries deserves our energy. In a world where everything moves so quickly, where constant communication has become the norm, silence is an act of rebellion. A sacred pause that says, I will not let the world consume me. I will protect my inner world. This form of silence is not cold or cruel. It is rooted in love for yourself, and eventually love for others too. Because when we protect our energy, we prevent resentment from growing. We allow relationships to be built on clarity rather than obligation. We show people how to respect us. And we give them the choice. Either they learn to treat us with the care we deserve, or they fall away naturally, leaving space for healthier connections to grow. Think of silence as a gentle but firm hand resting on the door of your heart. It does not slam the door shut, nor does it leave it wide open for anyone to walk through. It simply guards the doorway with intention, allowing in what is safe and sacred, and pausing when something feels misaligned. That pause, that silence is what saves us from being consumed by the chaos of others. Boundaries in silence also extend to self-talk. Sometimes the person who disrespects us most is not another but ourselves. How often do we fill the quiet with harsh inner words, reminding ourselves of our failures, punishing ourselves for mistakes, or replaying painful scenarios we cannot change? The silence of boundaries also means learning to quiet those inner voices. It means stopping the cycle of self-criticism and learning to replace it with compassion. When we meet ourselves with silence instead of judgment, we create a space for peace to rise. Let's not mistake silence for passivity. Silence is active, powerful, intentional. It requires awareness and strength. To remain silent in the face of disrespect is not weakness, it is clarity. To remain silent instead of over-explaining your worth is not avoidance, it is confidence. To remain silent while you choose when and how to respond is not indifference, it is wisdom. But silence can only serve as a healthy boundary when it is paired with self-awareness. If silence is used to avoid all communication, it becomes a wall. If it is used to punish others, it becomes manipulation. True silence in the service of boundaries is not about control, it is about alignment. It is about choosing when to engage and when to preserve your peace. As we learn to embody this, we start to notice the subtle shifts around us. People who once took us for granted begin to step more carefully, realizing that our silence is not emptiness but presence. People who once tested our patience notice that our stillness has strength, and they can no longer draw from us the reactions that once fed their power. And within ourselves, we find a new strength, the courage to protect what is sacred, to preserve what is valuable, and to honor the life we are creating. Silence as a boundary teaches us one of the most important truths. You do not have to fight for your worth. You do not have to prove it in every conversation, nor negotiate it with every interaction. Your worth simply is, and silence helps you live in that truth. So when you next find yourself in a moment where someone pushes against your peace, remember this: you do not always need to respond. You do not always need to explain. And you do not always need to fill the space with words. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to remain still, to hold your silence with dignity, and let it speak for you. That silence will carry your boundaries with more strength than any argument ever could. There is a quiet truth about men that is often misunderstood. A man may not always speak his feelings. He may not openly share what is happening in his heart. But his actions begin to reveal what words cannot. And when you have chosen to step back, when you no longer chase or overgive, his mind starts to awaken. He begins to notice the silence. And in that silence, he feels something that he cannot ignore: your worth. When a woman constantly tries to prove her love, a man takes it for granted. He assumes she will always be there, no matter what. But when you stop proving and start being, when you allow your presence to speak louder than your efforts, something shifts inside him. He starts to realize that he cannot simply rely on your endless giving. He begins to see that if he does not value you, he might lose you. This realization is not born from your words, but from your energy. Silence and space have a way of teaching lessons that conversations never could. A man who once overlooked your value begins to notice the depth of your absence. He feels the weight of what it means to lose not just a woman, but the peace, the care, the love that you carried into his life. Men, by nature, respect what they cannot easily possess. If you always make yourself too available, he forgets the privilege of your presence. But when you respect yourself enough to step back, you remind him that you are not an option, you are a blessing. And blessings are not meant to be neglected. Think of it this way: the sun never explains its light, yet everything grows because of it. In the same way, you don't need to explain your worth. Your worth is felt in your absence, in the quiet strength of your boundaries, in the way you carry yourself with dignity. When a man sees that you are not desperate for his attention, he is faced with a choice. Either he rises to meet you with respect and love, or he loses you. And if he chooses to rise, it will not be because you begged him to. It will be because your silence spoke louder than words. It will be because your self-respect reminded him of the kind of woman you are: a woman of value, a woman of strength, a woman who knows that love should never cost her dignity. This is the beauty of letting go of the need to prove. You stop chasing, and you allow him the space to decide if he will honor what you bring into his life. And if he does not, Then you will know with clarity that his love was never aligned with your worth. And here lies the healing truth. You never lose by choosing yourself. You never lose by walking away from someone who does not see you. Because every step you take in self-respect is a step closer to the love that was always meant for you. The gentle power of letting go and embracing yourself. There comes a moment in every journey of healing when you realize that the greatest strength is not in holding on. Not in fighting for someone's attention. Not in begging for love. But in letting go. Letting go is not weakness. Though the world often tells us otherwise. It is, in truth, the highest act of courage. The deepest expression of self-respect. And the doorway to peace. When you stop trying to control someone else's actions. When you release the desire to change them. You shift the power back into your own hands. You stop measuring your worth by the way they treat you. And you start measuring it by the way you treat yourself. That shift may feel quiet and invisible at first. But it transforms everything. Letting go is not about erasing love or pretending the hurt never existed. It is about choosing yourself even when your heart aches. It is about telling yourself, I deserve more than confusion. I deserve more than empty promises. I deserve love that feels safe, steady, and real. And when you choose yourself, life has a way of honoring that choice. The doors that once seemed closed begin to open. Opportunities, connections, and moments of joy start flowing in unexpected ways. Because you are no longer clinging to what drains you. You are making room for what nourishes you. This act of letting go is also an act of trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in the process of life. And trust in the truth that what is meant for you cannot pass you by. When you surrender the need to force outcomes, you allow space for something far better than you could have imagined to come into your life. You are no longer living from fear. You are living from love for yourself. Love for your journey. Love for the unfolding mystery of life. And here is the beauty. Letting go often makes people notice. The one who once ignored your worth may suddenly wonder where your light went. Why you no longer chase. Why your silence feels louder than your words. But by the time they realize it, you may have already stepped into a new chapter. One where your peace matters more than their attention. One where your joy is not tied to their approval. That is the quiet strength of a woman who knows her worth. Imagine yourself walking away from the old story that kept you small. Stepping into a new narrative where you are free, whole, and radiant. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing yourself, every single day. And in that choice, you discover the life you always deserved, a life filled with peace, love, and the gentle certainty that you are enough. So take a deep breath right now. Place your hand on your heart. Whisper to yourself, I am ready to release what no longer serves me. I am ready to trust the process. I am ready to love myself fully. Let that affirmation settle deep within you. Feel how your body softens, how your heart opens, how your spirit begins to rise. This is the power of letting go. This is the beginning of your freedom. And remember, healing is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice. A gentle daily choice to honor your worth and nurture your soul. Some days will feel heavy. Others will feel light. But each day that you choose yourself, you grow stronger, softer, and more at peace. As we close this journey together, I want you to know that you are not alone. Every step you take toward healing ripples into the world. Your courage inspires others. Your softness heals those around you. And your self-love becomes a quiet revolution. This is the heart of our space here, a sanctuary for healing, reflection, and growth. At Whisper to Heal, we believe that your story matters. Your pain deserves compassion, and your healing is possible. If this message has touched you, I invite you to carry it into your daily life, to return to it whenever you need a reminder of your strength. And if you feel called to continue this journey of healing with me, I welcome you to stay connected here on Whisper to Heal. Subscribe to the channel, share these words with someone who may need them, and join our growing community of hearts who are learning, day by day, to release, to trust, and to love again. Together, we create a circle of healing. Together, we whisper to heal.